This is Jordan Davidson for the Developing World final video with my lovely friend Kimber.
Hello, Kimber.
And so I am going to teach Kimber today about the Millennium Development Goals and Angola. So the 8 Millennium Development Goals were put into place in order to track the development of third world countries. They're the standards by which a country's progress from third world to first world can be judged. If a country shows improvement in the 8 key areas outlined by the goals, the country in question to be considered to be developing and growing. These 8 areas are eliminating poverty and hunger, improving education, establishing gender equality, reducing infant mortality, improving maternal health, preventing HIV/AIDS, malaria and other diseases, creating environmental stability, and establishing global partnerships for further development. So, going to begin by just sort of going through the list of how Angola is doing in each of those areas, which in some regards isn't very well, honestly. So, in the area of poverty, Angola has one of the highest rates of poverty in the world, with 94% of Angolan families considered to be living in poverty. Most families lack access to drinking water and adequate sanitation, which leads to disease and fatalities. Most Angolans live without creature comforts such as electricity or indoor plumbing, which I just think is kind of insane because we just have that as like a given. As like a given.
Not even a question.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that some of the poorest people here would be still considered obscenely wealthy by Angolan standards. Poverty in Angola can be closely attributed to the Civil War, which ended in 2002 but caused far-reaching effects that are still lasting into today. And the Civil War, it broke down city infrastructures, which cost millions in repairs, and it also harmed health systems and increased the cost of health care while simultaneously driving down the quality. Plus, it overloaded the health system anyway because lots of people had issues, either mental, physical, whatever, from the war, so it just became like this backlogged system that couldn't handle the amount of people that it had to deal with at the time. The educational system was also affected, which meant that citizens were left with fewer career prospects because they had less education, which led to higher chances of their remaining in poverty. Crops and livestock were killed in the war, which hurt both the livelihoods of farmers, and it created famines for people who lived off the produce from those crops and livestock. And more than 2/3 of the Angolan population live on less than $2 in US currency per day. So that's that for poverty, that rosy outlook. So in the area of education, most of Angola's schools were destroyed during the Angolan Civil War, and those that were not were left damaged, causing safety risks to children and reducing the quality of education children receive. Makeshift schools were constructed in Angolan refugee camps, which were typically overcrowded and understaffed. About 68% of Angolan children drop out of school for various reasons, including poverty, pregnancy, or becoming orphaned. And I feel like producing more teachers for Angolan schools would be a mutually beneficial association because it would simultaneously increase the quality of Angolan schools and it would provide teaching jobs to people to help lift them out of poverty. Where are my timers? So in the third area, gender equality, one of the biggest hurdles women in Angola face is that of workplace inequality. Women are rendered economically dependent on men, and most women who work do so informally, performing jobs that don't appear on census reports or on labor reports, which are like seamstressing, making and selling crafts, etc. Most formal jobs held by women are low pay, low skill, and low advancement retail jobs. The union density rating, which is the amount of women who are employed in union-covered fields for females, is only 20%. Girls drop out of school in higher rates than boys, and only 53.8% of girls are literate. Since 2012, women in Angola have been campaigning and becoming involved in issues pertaining to domestic violence, family planning, education, etc. So they have been growing lately. There's just been a lot of growth to do. In the area of reducing infant mortality, despite recent improvements, Angola still has one of the highest rates of infant mortality in the world, with 260 out of every 1,000 children born dying before age 5, which is insane because that's above 25%. And 29.2% of Angolan children suffer from malnourishment, which obviously plays a big role in child mortality. The collapse of the Angolan health system after the Civil War damaged childhood vaccination programs, which makes them more susceptible to disease. Since 2010, the Angolan Ministry of Health has partnered with UNICEF to launch the municipal health system in pursuit of reducing child mortality rates, with the focus on eliminating the leading causes of child mortality, which are malaria, diarrhea, respiratory infections, and malnutrition. It is also focusing on deworming and immunizations against vaccine-preventable diseases. High child mortality rates can also be attributed to the high number of orphans in Angola, with thousands of Angolan children having been orphaned by AIDS or as a result of the Civil War. And then in the areas of AIDS and malaria, etc., 9.5% of children are orphaned by AIDS. There are outbreaks of cholera in rural areas due to tainted water. 2.3 adults in Angola percent of adults in 2.3% of adults in Angola are living with HIV/AIDS, which can be linked to the fact that only 32.1% of young adults are educated about AIDS and its prevention. And then tsetse flies transmit sleeping sickness in large droves, which is causing fever, itching, joint pains, confusion, poor coordination, and if left untreated, is fatal. In the area of maternal health, about 610 mothers die in Angola per every 100,000 live births. The leading causes of death during the birthing process are hypertension, hemorrhage, obstructed labor, and infection. Unsafe abortions are also a leading cause of death in would-be mothers. Only 31% of mothers in Angola breastfeed due to the fact that a lot of them aren't healthy enough to breastfeed. In recent years, women's access to pre- and postnatal care has gone up. And access to these care resources is higher in more industrialized areas, and maternal death rates are still very high in more rural areas where they're not as closely linked to the different care plans available to them. In the area of environmental stability, landmines from the Civil War wreaked havoc on Angola's environment and landscape. Some of the animals and fish in Angola have been hunted to the point of near extinction. Deforestation has also taken its toll. Less than 50% of Angola is considered to be forest by this point. Angola's biodiversity has also been threatened by rampant poaching. Rainfall levels have fallen while average temperatures have increased. And Angola's chief exports, minerals, oils, and diamonds, have damaged Angola's environmental stability because the processes used to extract these goods from the ground are not very good for the environment, to say the least. And then in the last area, the global partnerships, Angola's oil production has led to several global economic partnerships because it's a very profitable export, obviously. Angola and UNICEF have been partners since 2010. The partnership is devoted to improving conditions in Angola and so far has been quite successful. Angola's partnership with the United Nations Interregional Crime and Justice Institute is focused on improving Angola's juvenile justice system, and they aim to meet this goal by promoting safe lifestyles for children, discouraging misbehavior, improving family relations, providing physical activities for children, and increasing children's socializations with other children. And then just some last remarks. Angola has many struggles, obviously, but it is showing marked development in the Millennium Goals. By June 2010, Angola had been deemed as making considerable strides in more than half of them. The biggest jumps Angola has made are in the areas of malnutrition and child mortality, them obviously being linked to one another. And it's also improved in the areas of education, gender balance, malaria prevention, and HIV/AIDS awareness. Its current rating is 143rd out of 158 countries featured in the Human Development Report, and in an attempt to reach all of the Millennium Development Goals satisfactorily by the 2015 deadline, 30% of Angola's entire budget has been earmarked for social improvements, which all projections say was a good idea because that's where most of its problems lie. So if they're able to improve there, then they can improve as a whole. So, lovely Kimber. Do you have any questions?
What kind of programs specifically are they doing and using to make those goals happen?
Okay, so again, a lot of it's through a lot of it's through UNICEF and through more like global charities. There is one in particular that I remember reading about through education that it's based on, or its focus is on providing like better textbooks and materials for schools in Angola. So a lot of it is charitable campaigns, a lot of Christian campaigns, things like that.
Okay. So there's like a lot of people that are like stepping in and giving them help, but I was just like, when you were talking about that, it made me kind of think like, are they teaching them to fish or giving them fish, if you know what I mean with that whole
Right.
thing?
And that's a really good question. That's a question that I thought about too. And it sounds like I feel like a lot of what I came across was about giving people fish, but it all just depends on the individual charity. And interestingly, like it seems like the more, and I don't mean for this to sound biased or anything, but it seems like the more Christian the charity was, the more focus it was on giving or teaching to fish rather than giving the fish. Instead of like throwing money at the problem, it was about learning to helping people learn to become more self-sustaining, especially the more gender equality based ones that are about like teaching women to work and find profitable skills and things like that.
Okay, so it seems like a really big overarching theme in all of this is education and being knowledgeable about their own circumstance. And so, what kind of steps are being taken to educate the people in Angola so that they know more about HIV/AIDS and they know how to better help themselves?
Okay, so they have started implementing more like sex education programs, teaching about like contraception of different sorts, things like that. Trying to use like delicate terms, but just teaching about like safe sex and being like more selective about partners and things like that, so that you at least like know what you're getting into and you know how to avoid undesirable consequences, I guess you could say. If that answers your question.
Yes.
In as vague of terms as possible, I
Yes.
know. Alrighty, and so that concludes my video. Thank you, and you all have a good night. Thanks.